Welcome to Fridays with Fintelekt. Today, my guest is Edgar Lopez, Director of the Gibraltar Financial Intelligence Unit. Edgar has been a career policing professional and has been with the GFIU since the last 3 years, before which he served in various roles within the Royal Gibraltar Police. Edgar, welcome to Fridays with Fintelekt, and may I also request you to say a few words about your professional career so far so that our viewers can get to know you better.
Thank you, Shirish, for hosting me. Well, as you've said, I've had a career in the police and serving in different departments, but mainly in the crime division, where I also served in special branch, which deals with national security. I was later appointed as the executive coordinator for a multi-agency unit that deals with criminal intelligence, and I also headed the Gibraltar Interpol sub-bureau. Ironically, I had sort of no particular interest in financial crime, but then I became involved with the Gibraltar Financial Intelligence Unit, the GFIU, as the head of projects, primarily leading the unit through the Moneyval evaluation process, and was also the project lead for the development and implementation of our online reporting system, which for suspicious activity reports. And following a restructure of the FIU in March last year, I was appointed head of FIU by the Attorney General, and then I transferred from the police to the civil service.
Right. Thanks, Edgar. So, Edgar, to start with, could you run us through some of the notable achievements of the Gibraltar FIU?
So this year we mark 25 years since GFIU was established, and it's undergone a restructure following the Moneyval evaluation and recommendations made in respect of immediate outcome 6. And it was then that we started this restructure process. You see, since the FIU was established, it had been made up of law enforcement officers who were seconded to the unit. But unfortunately, it suffered with the loss of skills and gaps in knowledge due to frequent changes in staff. Now, by having a core of civilian officers who form a permanent body, then we can retain those skills and expertise in, as you know, is quite a specialized field of work. So what we have is, we still have seconded officers because we need access to police and customs databases. And also having them working in the unit is also beneficial for all parties. And I think that we've coped very well, readjusting to a new structure. We've also stayed on course for our Moneyval follow-up, and we've maintained the unit operational throughout the challenges of working through a pandemic. What drives the FIU's progress is our 3-year strategic plan, which is based on 6 key principles, which are centered on developing our own resources, increasing capacity building, engaging with our partners. And I'm pleased to say that many of those key outcomes have already been achieved, and I think that it demonstrates the path that we're taking. It illustrates the significant shift towards achieving the results that we want, and we're always aiming for excellence. So in a short period of time, we've managed to address the recommendations made by Moneyval, and also achieved a number of things that we had to do, including the issuing of comprehensive guidance on terrorist financing, on proliferation financing, on improving the submission of suspicious activity reports. We've also established a number of working groups to share and exchange information, and we have relaunched a successful outreach program that includes an e-learning system, which has obviously come in very handy during the pandemic. And we've also published a corporate communication strategy, which that document lays a foundation for our strategic approach to effective communication and how we intend to implement it over the next 3 years. So you may have seen, and your viewers may have seen, that we've become more visible using social media and other more traditional platforms like our website to raise awareness on money laundering, terrorist financing, and other predicate offenses that have a financial aspect to them. And we're now in a position where we can place more emphasis in highlighting emerging threats or residual threats, for example, on raising awareness on online child sexual abuse and exploitation, human trafficking, smuggling of migrants, and illegal wildlife trade.
Right. So, Edgar, you completed the National Risk Assessment in 2020. Can you take us through some of the highlights of the NRA?
Well, Gibraltar published its third NRA in August last year, and for the first time, we included proliferation financing as a separate topic. And it also included a previous confidential assessment of terrorist financing risk for the jurisdiction and MPO sectors. And when we started the NRA process, we looked at a number of factors. So we took into account the EU supranational risk assessment and, of course, the 5AMLD. And we developed this in consultation with the private sector so that it reflected the threats, the risks, and the vulnerabilities to Gibraltar. And there are two documents. One is an executive summary, and the other one is a more comprehensive version. So if we compare this latest 2020 version with our previous ones, you'll note that we have included a number of new risks, for example, geographic risk, lending activities, legal entities and arrangements, gambling redefined by products, e-money, real estate, etc. So in order to assess each of these risks, we looked at the main commercial activities that are taking place in Gibraltar, which are centered around the provision of services to non-resident customers, mainly UK nationals, but also from low-risk jurisdictions. And as you know, nowadays, most of the onboarding with new and existing customers is conducted in a non-face-to-face manner, especially in some of the products and the services that we provide, whether gaming or e-money. And therefore, that has a higher inherent risk. But in general, you'll find that, although some of the products that Gibraltar has on offer may prove attractive to money laundering, there are, there is a lower risk for terrorist financing and proliferation financing to our jurisdiction. And the NRA also noted that, whilst we have transactions with high-risk jurisdictions, but they are relatively small in number and volume, but it also stresses that reporting entities have to be aware of this and obviously heighten their need for additional controls. We also have transactions to and from drug producing or trafficking jurisdictions, and those also need to be subject to additional scrutiny for either money laundering links, or in those cases where there are conflict zones and neighboring regions to those conflict zones, then they need to consider additional terrorist financing risk. In terms of the proliferation financing risk, we noted that we didn't have any cases of PF that had been identified locally. We didn't have any assets or any funds associated with sanctions related to PF. We've never received an international request with regards to PF, and we don't neighbor a proliferating state or have any sort of diplomatic ties or cultural ties either with the DPRK or with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, although there's no data or no evidence to suggest that PF has been experienced, we are aware that the threat may be negligible, but there could be instances of proliferation financing within our finance center, and those cannot be discarded. In terms of geographic risk, Gibraltar is located at the entrance to the Mediterranean, so we are sort of sandwiched between two larger regions. We've got North Africa to the south and the Iberian Peninsula to the north, and obviously we have a border with Spain. And consequently, our proximity to these two regions where there are known illicit activities, mainly related to drugs trafficking, that obviously increases the impact on our assessment. And over the last few years, we've seen an increase in organized crime groups setting up close to Gibraltar and establishing their presence around Gibraltar. But at the same time, we've also seen a significant investigation and sort of tackling the problem of OCGs in the area by both law enforcement in Spain and also Gibraltar, and actually in some cases working jointly. But we've seen that increase in the supply of cannabis being trafficked from North Africa across the Strait of Gibraltar and into Spain for distribution in Gibraltar. But when you have between these two regions, you have a small jurisdiction with financial services, then that could be attractive for OCGs to launder the funds. And that is something that's been captured within the latest national risk assessment.
Right. Edgar, how different would you say it is to run an NRA for a financial center such as Gibraltar as compared to a mainstream jurisdiction? Are there any specific learnings from the approach and experience, from your NRA exercise that other financial centers could benefit from?
That's an interesting question, because I would say that a finance center in a small jurisdiction is what we have, but we still need to apply all the standards that apply to, as you referred to it, mainstream jurisdictions. In other words, our finance center has to be compliant with international standards, which are set by a range of bodies like the FATF, all the likes. And of course, we need to incorporate those recommendations into our legislative framework and also be able to maintain our global reputation. But as you know, the FATF requires each country to conduct or at least undertake an understanding of the risks and at least demonstrate the understanding of those risks for money laundering, terrorist financing, and more recently, proliferation financing within the various sectors of their economy. And I think that over the last few years, what we've seen is a development of the national risk assessment into a document, which, if you look at the time of when it was published, I think that it went beyond the FATF requirements of assessing relative risk. And, I'm referring to two particular risks like proliferation financing and the illegal wildlife trade. So, I think it's difficult to make an accurate comparison, but in general, I would say that finance centers like ours, which have a range of services that can be found in larger centers like London, but we still need to ensure that we conduct an assessment not just on the services and the products that we offer as a jurisdiction, but also that we need to at least ensure that we contextualize the client base for each of those services, which may include local and international. Having said that, most of Gibraltar's client base is in the UK. As an example, we've got an insurance sector which accounts for over 25% of the premiums paid in the UK motor market. But in terms of conducting an assessment, what we've done is we've used very comprehensive data sets from a number of stakeholders, which has provided us with granular data from law enforcement, from the FIU, and from the regulators. And additionally, we've also looked at the requests that have been made by foreign jurisdictions to assess the types of criminality suspected to have a link with Gibraltar, but being detected outside Gibraltar. And I think that it's also important to note here that there has been, a lot of consultation with the private sector, because they have a crucial fight or a crucial role in fighting economic crime, and their input has been invaluable because they have a better understanding of the vulnerabilities of their services or products, much better than what we have. So they give us another perspective. And when you combine the data that we have and you combine the understanding of both the private and the public sector, I think what it does, it provides us with, an improved and a more richer, credible analysis of the risks that we face.
Great. So, Edgar, coming to the fifth round mutual evaluation by Moneyval, and to see if you're in agreement with the recommendations. There were two specific recommendations. And there are many other jurisdictions also who struggle with similar issues. One is improving the understanding of terror financing risks, and the second is strengthening the quality of STRs or SARs. So it would be great to get your comments on this if possible. And Also, if you could share the action plan that you're implementing to better these two areas.
Well, look, anything that improves our understanding of terrorist financing risk and anything that improves the quality of the SDRs is a welcome addition to our arsenal against criminal or terrorist activities. But one thing that we made clear to our Moneyval assessors was that whilst we didn't have or we hadn't detected any terrorist-related activity locally, and the threat of homegrown terrorism is low, we still cannot ignore the fact that we are a finance center which may be abused by facilitators and terrorist groups in order to funnel their funds. So in order to optimize our capabilities in respect of terrorist financing, we are developing expertise, we are improving our collective understanding of the financing of terrorism, and we are improving resilience with our partners and with the private sector, because we want to ensure that our infrastructure is optimized so that all the functional areas of the police and the FIU, and we've done this for proliferation financing, can work, seamlessly, and obviously then we can follow our strategy. Because when you have broad and resilient networks, we are more likely to identify terrorist financing or any attempt really to abuse our finance center. And therefore, in order to achieve this, what we're doing is we're placing a stronger emphasis on training and awareness, which is being conducted through the FIU's outreach program, Project Nexus, and the publication of very comprehensive counter-terrorist financing guidance document, which not only includes jihadist terrorism, but also addresses the far-right extremism and terrorism. And this will be followed up shortly by an e-learning workshop, which is something that we're in the final stages of actually we hope to publish it very quickly. But I think that it's also important that we have a collective understanding, and that we keep abreast with the evolving threat landscape and the trends and the typologies, not just at the for law enforcement, but also those working within the finance center. And what we've done is that we've provided situational awareness in respect of the terrorist financing risk that we face as a finance center, given our proximity to North Africa. And by situational awareness, what I mean is the concept of being aware of what is happening around you. So in other words, we could say that this is a more of a proactive approach to minimizing the risk. So by anticipating, identifying, and understanding the impact of potential threats, then we can prevent the loss of property and in some instances, the loss of life. And therefore, when you raise this situational awareness, we would expect that financial institutions not only assess the specific institutional risk against the threat, the trends, and those funding flows, but also assess how they are being affected by geographic risk. And this is something that's been covered in the NRA. But they have to look at those risks, whether they are domestic, regional, or global. And one of the more recent highlights this year is the establishment of a counter-terrorist financing forum between the Crown dependencies and Gibraltar FIUs and the police. So that's Jersey, Guernsey, Isle of Man, and Gibraltar, because we have a very strong relationship. There are many similarities in terms of our legal framework, our finance centers, and therefore it made sense that we continue to develop our understanding of TF risk that are unique to small jurisdictions like ours. And I think that this will be, an invaluable tool for us. So, I've rattled on a bit about terrorist financing, but I think it's important that the second point that you raise about strengthening the quality of the SDRs. So from an FIU perspective, the evaluators found that the GFIU had increased its capacity and extended cooperation with LEAs and the regulators. And therefore we had increased the generating of those financial intelligence reports. But they also noted that our analytical products were only used by law enforcement to a limited extent, and therefore it didn't have a significant impact in developing money laundering investigations. And this potentially could have been attributed to the quality of the suspicious activity reports, or the SDRs, received at the FIU. But if you look at the work that we've done recently, I think that we've made significant efforts to address this. We've published new guidance for the submission of SDRs, which again was followed by an e-learning workshop. And we've also developed a feedback system for every SAR that's received at the FIU. And this is more of a recent development of the online reporting system, which can now provide reporters with prompt feedback on the quality of the disclosure. So the quality of each of those SARs is looked at. We then make an assessment. We look at the value and the quality of the information contained within, and then we apply a rating scale, which ensures that the quality of the SAR can be determined. And therefore, I think that by using this, we ensure that the required standards are met and maintained. But I also believe that it improves our engagement, and it provides a more personal approach, which understandably in some larger FIUs it could be almost impossible due to the volume that they receive. But at the same time, I have to admit that the system isn't perfect. It requires fine-tuning because feedback can be subjective, and it's difficult to provide feedback to MLROs that are submitting those SARs. But we are working on it, and we're making improvements to it. And the last point that I just wanted to add on there was that we've also published a sectoral typologies report and also strategic analysis. Again, they are there designed to improve the quality of the disclosures. So as you can see, what we've done is we've had a very proactive approach, often thinking outside the box or the more traditional approach of an FIU. But I think what we are seeing is some very positive outcomes made as a result of the recommendations contained in that mutual evaluation report.
Excellent. I think that's a very, very collaborative approach. And I think, the general complaint from most reporting entities is that we don't get feedback from the FIU. So I think it's great that you're doing that. So Edgar, the MER also notes that the legislation in Gibraltar sets out a comprehensive framework for international cooperation, which enables the authorities to provide assistance with generally positive feedback from international partners. Can you speak a bit about this framework and your experiences around it?
So our highest score actually on the mutual evaluation report was on IO2, which obviously refers to international cooperation. And we have developed it further to make it even better. We've noted the MER's priority actions on international cooperation, one of which said that the economic crime unit of the police should treat each of those incoming MLA requests in conjunction with the FIU, and also base it on advice from the government law office as valuable intelligence, so that then we can develop that into a Gibraltar money laundering investigation. So in order to address this, what we've done is that we've established a working group specifically for mutual legal assistance, which meets every 2 weeks, and we've centralized all the MLAs into the GFIU's database, so that the data of that MLA can be sort of tapped into by the FIU, can be harvested at the FIU, and then we look at whether there are any further links which may lead to a local money laundering investigation. And this has proved a very useful process, because we can now engage a lot better with all the relevant stakeholders using this centralized system that holds this data, which also helps us sort of to have a more focused approach and more effective on those sophisticated forms of money laundering or local money laundering investigations where predicate offences may have been committed outside Gibraltar. And you'll also note that in our 3-year strategic plan, one of our priorities is engaging with international partners. So, that's there so that we can engage better with them, and we can share financial intelligence in a more proactive way. And although Moneyval actually noted that the assistance that we had provided by the FIU to other FIUs had generally been commended by the global network, we continue to place a significant emphasis on our fight, against money laundering, terrorist financing, etc., by engaging better with the FIUs through the Egmont Group. So, like I said, we are committed to make further improvements, especially in the response times or information exchange, because it will not only ensure that we meet our international standards and our international obligations, but also, more importantly, that we support our colleagues in other FIUs so that this has an impact on transnational crime. So what we've done is that we've redesigned the international approach by having a dedicated officer as the Egmont liaison officer, who also deals with mutual legal assistance and also provides support as an associate member of the IACCC, which is the International Anti-Corruption Coordination Center. And, this approach has created a more structured or provided more structure to our international assistance, which ensures that our response times to those international requests are more timely and more effective. And I'd like to think that the service that we currently provide is excellent, and or at least is up there at the top to our counterparts in other FIUs.
Excellent. So, Edgar, in closing, what would you say are your ongoing expectations from your reporting entities or accountable persons, and what is the next big project for the GFIU?
Our expectations, there might be a broad question here, but with a broad response. But I think, if I narrow them to just one or 2 points, our expectations from reporting entities is that they continue to improve their understanding of the risk and the threats that they face, but also enhance their understanding of what we at the FIU and law enforcement require as valuable, actionable intelligence, so that will assist or can trigger an investigation. And I hope that, by our continued structured outreach program, then we can keep them updated with the analysis that we're conducting at the FIU, and also providing them with guidance and typologies that will improve their reporting. And look, we have an excellent relationship with reporting entities, but I want to take that further, into our next bigger project, and that's to create a well-established public-private partnership. But to do this, there's still some work to be done, and I'm sure that there will be obstacles along the way. We have seen the successes of other PPPs in jurisdictions like the UK, Australia, Canada, and I want to replicate that in Gibraltar. Given that we are a small jurisdiction, but we're very agile, we're able to adapt very quickly. So I really hope that we can achieve this by the end of this year. And this is something that I've actually, put some pressure on myself, because I've included it as a strategic objective or a principle in the, a priority in the strategic plan. And I'm hoping that we can achieve this by the end of the year. But look, at the same time, there will be a lot of work to cover, but I sense that there is a willingness from all the stakeholders to be able to achieve this.
Edgar, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts. I wish you all the very best in your future endeavors.
Thank you, Shirish. Thank you very much.